All right, you guys, we are going to go ahead and go over our notes for Learning Goal C. This learning goal states you will be able to generate a unique experimental design by identifying the variables of the experiment. So now in the scientific method, we know we've identified the problem, we have done our research and observations, created a testable question, and come up with a hypothesis. Now we're ready to start the experiment. So when we start an experiment, we need to identify our variables and go over a few other things. So first, let's talk about what is an experiment. An experiment is a scientific process to make a discovery. So it's like testing something out, but testing out in a scientific way. A variable is something that can be changed in an experiment. All right, so any type of variable is something that could change in an experiment. Now, there's 3 different types of variables. The first is the independent variable. This is the variable that's changed by the scientist. In the Mythbusters episode, the independent variable would be the type of intersection, because one time they did a 4-way stop and the other time they did a roundabout. That's what they were changing in the experiment. The dependent variable is the measured or observed change. So for the Mythbusters example, we saw that they were counting the number of cars that went through the intersection. So we know that was what they were measuring, the number of cars. That's the dependent variable. And a constant variable is anything that stays the same in an experiment. So in the Mythbusters experiment, some constant variables they had were the time the cars had to go through the intersection was 15 minutes. The number of cars that they were just having in the experiment altogether from the starting point, the type of car, the drivers, all of those things were the same. Now let's look at this testable question. How does water affect the lifespan of a plant? You're going to notice in your notes on page 7 that there is this question. Can you try to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the constant? Well, the constant you can't identify from the testable question, but you could name. So the independent is the water. How does the water affect the lifespan of the plant? The scientist is going to give maybe 3 different plants 3 different amounts of water. That's what they're changing. They're going to measure the lifespan of the plant. So how long does the plant live with those different amounts of water? If you're testing the amount of water, you would want to make sure you keep the sunlight the same, the type of plant the same, the soil the same, because you only want the amount of water to be what's affecting your experiment. If you change the soil, then you don't know at the end of the experiment if it was the water or the soil that affected the experiment, which is why it's so important you can only have one independent variable. Here's another problem. How does sunlight affect the lifespan of a plant? Our independent variable is the sunlight. That's what the scientist is going to change. The dependent would be the lifespan of the plant. And constants here, now your constant would be the water, because you'd want the water to be the same if you're testing sunlight. How does the age affect the time it takes to complete the puzzle? The independent variable here is the age of the child doing the puzzle. So if you test a group of 6-year-olds and test a group of 8-year-olds, you're changing the age of the people that you're testing. The time it takes to complete the puzzle is the dependent variable. That's what you're going to measure. Some constants would definitely be the puzzle and the environment of the room, things like that. Some other words that you're going to hear when you're designing an experiment: constraints. Those are the limitations you have in the experiment. Trials. This is the number of times you conduct the experiment. The more trials, the more accurate your results will be. And criteria. This is always the goal of the experiment. Those are some added vocabulary words. I hope this helps you complete your notes. Good luck.